Hi, everybody. My name is Banu Jafarli, and I'm one of the program managers for Microsoft Defender for Identity.
And I'm Daniel Naim, and I'm also a product manager for Microsoft Defender for Identity.
And today's session is going to be focused on investigation post-breach. So before we get started, I want to talk about what Microsoft Defender for Identity is focused on. So it's a product that's focused on protecting on-prem identities, and it's done within 4 different phases. The first phase is prevent, and it's where we're leveraging identity security posture assessments to help you reduce the attack surface. The second phase is detect. So if there's an attacker, we'll alert you in real time and make sure you're aware of any risks or anomalies. And most of our presentation will be focused on this phase. The third phase is investigate. We want to make sure that we're leveraging UABA functionality to understand who are the riskiest users in your environment and prioritizing them. The fourth phase is respond. We want to make sure that we're helping you reduce the response time and providing you with the right tools to help you manage compromised identities. In the next slide, we're going to be talking to you a bit more about what Microsoft Defender for Identity is. So it's a cloud-based security solution that's leveraging your on-premises Active Directory signals to identify and detect and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insiders inside of your organization. Microsoft Defender for Identity is using real-time data, network traffic, trace data, and Windows events, and helping you find anomalies quickly. It's using a combination of behavioral known attack techniques as well as security signal. But what's making our product unique is the fact that we're focusing on network traffic. We're able to do a deep packet inspection with all the layers of the network package, and by extracting that information, we're able to provide the closest thing to the truth. Unfortunately, Windows events alone are not enough, and it's very difficult to work off of them for advanced detections. In addition to this, we're also providing you lateral movement paths, which are helping you understand prior to when an attack happens, how an attacker can move laterally in your environment and compromise non-sensitive users until they move and compromise a privileged account. And we're helping you identify this path so you can go ahead and break your weak points. In addition to this, as I mentioned before, Microsoft Defender for Identity is leveraging UABA functionality. It's really helping your team understand what are the abnormalities in your environment. It's not just for the user, but their security group, as well as an organization as a whole. And lastly, we provide data enrichment. We'll help you understand what is the real name behind every detection and the type of operating system behind each of the IPs. And we do this using active name resolution. So Microsoft Defender for Identity is an essential part of the Microsoft Threat Protection products. So in the past, and if you were previous with Microsoft Cloud App Security, last year we announced our integration where you were able to see alerts and activities from both on-premises and in the cloud. But now we're extending that functionality further to just giving you an overall overview of what's happening within your threat protection products and helping you investigate all your incidents and alerts in a single pane of glass. And throughout this presentation, we will be focusing on the detection investigation experience in Microsoft 365 Defender portal. And next, Daniel will be talking to you about what's new in our product.
Thank you, Banu. Today is an exciting day for Microsoft Defender for Identity, as we are happy to announce the general availability for our new sensor for ADFS. We understand that in the modern workspace, there is an increase of hybrid infrastructure that uses both Azure Active Directory and Active Directory for authentication purposes. Thanks to the new ADFS sensor, Microsoft Defender for Identity is not staying behind on this and now provides greater value with new types of data it didn't provide before. By deploying the new ADFS sensor, you'll get visibility into ADFS authentication-based activities, enrichment of our existing detections with ADFS data, and also protection of the ADFS server as an attack surface. In the last couple of months, we worked together with some of our private preview customers and managed to find out what opportunities Microsoft Defender for Identity brings to the table with an ADFS sensor. With ADFS sensor, we can enrich our authentication-based detection like brute force or account enumeration with activities done by ADFS. We also provide greater context for existing activities, such as whether multi-factor authentication performed, or just activities that were not simply available before, such as failed login, user lockout, and more. We also understand that protecting the ADFS itself is important and tweaked our top-notch Active Directory detections into the ADFS server as well. Protection against malicious code execution or malicious service creation, to name a few. Finally, we can now identify IDFS server in the environment as a high valuable asset and provide more context when any sort of activities happens against it. You are more than welcome to try it out now. And now let's talk about what's new in our detection offering. We understand that our detection is one of the most important values that we can bring as a product, and this is why we are consistently looking into new types of alert, detections, and activities. Traditionally, Microsoft Defender for Identity provides somewhat small number of detections with small signal to noise ratio. With keeping the high integrity of our detections, we are looking to extend our security offering. This includes creation of detections for newly found CVEs, like CVE 2020-1472, that allows changing of the DC password using netlogon, complex attack scenarios that are really sought after, like SPN exposure, what is often being referred as Kerberos, or using stolen certificates from one device into another. In today's session, we'll be demonstrating some of the new detections, such as reconnaissance that is based on sensitive attribute, golden ticket creation using resource-based constraint delegation, and more. In the near future, we are also looking to create alerts that are based on changes of the risk score for a certain user, alerts that are based on scored activities, and other attack techniques identified by our experienced research team. As always, keep following our tech community blog post to learn more about these detections and any new detection we are announcing in the future.
Next, we'll briefly touch on what the investigation experience looks like. So here we have the user page, and if you're familiar with Microsoft Cloud App Security, you are probably familiar with this page as well. So here, as we mentioned throughout our presentation, we use UABA functionalities to identify a risk score for all of your riskiest users. So here we have Will Blank. You can see that he's a sensitive user, and you can see his investigation priority score, and we can see the alerts on the activities that have contributed to the score, and we can also see his overall user exposure, and if he has any lateral movement paths identified. And we'll be focusing more about this within the demo. Now we're looking at Microsoft Defender for Identity Alerts in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. Since we know that attacks are rarely happening in isolation, it allows you to see the Microsoft Defender for Identity alerts as a part of a larger incident. So here we're able to show you what else is involved, such as the devices and users. And again, we'll be talking more about this throughout our demo. Here we can see that automated incident response, so we can see any malicious activity that's happening, the entities that are analyzed, the users and the alerts that are received, and then we can actually get further evidence to understand this as well. And so here, this is the evidence behind the automated playbook. You can see the investigation graph that we just showed you, and then you can see that user activity and the impacted entities, as well as the detection that caused the automated playbook to trigger.
And now I'm going to walk you through the demo scenario. This session scenario starts with an actor that got control over client 1. This can be done either by sending a phishing email to get the first foothold in the network, social engineering, or running a malicious code in the victim PC. Client 1, our victim's device, is usually owned by Mark Lundy, who is a simple domain user with a simple level of permissions. The first part of the attack starts with the discovery phase, where the actor on client 1 is doing an LDAP reconnaissance for users with sensitive attributes. This is a common enumeration technique that helps attacker identify user with certain attributes that might be easier to exploit. This can include, for example, user that does not require password to log in, using DES key only that shouldn't be enabled, and others. In our case, the actor tried to enumerate users that does not require password to log in, users that do not require pre-authentication, and most importantly, users that are trusted for delegation using resource-based constraint delegation. While discovering the potential user for the lateral movement phase, the actor finds out there is a RBCD configured on KERP-TGT account for username Mandy Rose, our first victim user. The actors knows that if they will get access to Mandy Rose, they will be able to perform a complex golden ticket manipulation using resource-based constraint delegation. With this knowledge in hand, the actor doing Kerberoasting and find out that Mandy rows actually have an MS SQL service principal name by requesting Kerberos TGS using Mark Landy for Mandy rows MS SQL service. The alert for Kerberoasting will trigger, which is also known as service principal name exposure. With the user exposed after the successful Kerberoasting, the attacker managed to crack Mandy Row's password using brute force tool offline. Now, once the attacker got Mandy's Row's password, they can now perform creation of a golden ticket using RBCD to get the TGT for the third user, Will Blank. Will Blank is a domain admin and has a high level of privileges. From now, with the domain admin access, this is pretty much game over. The attacker can use DC sync to get hashes for every account in the domain and get the domain dominance. And now, let's see this in action.
Okay, so as Daniel just explained the demo scenario, we're going to walk through and show you what this looks like in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the incidents page. In the incidents page, Microsoft 365 Defender is aggregating all related alerts, entities, and investigation evidence across devices, users, mailboxes, and provides a thorough overview of the entire breadth of an attack. So here, one of the incidents that I have is using reconnaissance to laterally move using resource delegation. So once I'm on this actual instance, I see different things. I see the summary of what's actually happened within this incident. So I see that we have 1 impacted device, 3 impacted users, 4 active alerts, and 3 of them are part of the MITRE attack tactics, which each alert is going ahead and getting mapped to. I can see the devices, again, they've been impacted, and of course the user. So if I actually go ahead and click on the alerts, I'm getting a different level of information. So I'll see the title of the alert, the severity, what it's linked by, and which MITRE attack framework category this alert is actually part of. One of the things that we're all aware of is for an attack to go ahead and begin, it always starts within the reconnaissance phase. And as Daniel has explained to you what's taking place in this alert, we have this alert called Active Directory Attributes, reconnaissance using LDAP. So this is where pretty much one of the attacker used different enumeration techniques to go ahead and get access to one of the users. So if we actually click on the alert, it's going to take us to the alert page. That I do want to call out is we're currently still working on adding additional features and functionalities to the Microsoft 365 Defender product. So right now we're going to be looking at the alert page within the Microsoft Cloud App Security portal. So when we come to the Microsoft Cloud App Security portal, we have the description of the alert. So as Daniel mentioned, we can see here that an actor on client 1 sends suspicious LDAP queries, searching for 3 types of sensitive enumeration. So if I click on it, I can see that what they used was resource-based constraint delegation. And I have important information. I can see that a potential lateral movement path was identified, and obviously this is part of the discovery technique. Now, if I go back to see the next alert, I see suspected Kerberos SPN. So we're going to go ahead and click on this alert. So as I spoke to you guys earlier, the way the attacker was able to identify Mandy Rose, during this enumeration, he was able to identify that RBCD was configured. And RBCD is usually turned off in most organizations, as I mentioned. This was a vulnerability that the attacker actually exploited. So he was able to see, 1, the user had the configuration turned on, and the resource, which would be a service on the device. So at the same time, the attacker was doing Kerberosing and to see which user didn't have RBC turned on, and he knew that user could actually be compromised. Now, using the suspected Kerberos SPN exposure, we can see that the attacker was using Kerberosing techniques to have the SPN exposure to confirm that Mandy Rose had an SPM usage, which could have been leveraged. And the attacker was going ahead and trying to find Mandy Rose's password. So if I actually click on the persistence alert, which was suspected golden ticket usage, we can see that Will Blank sent a suspicious Kerberos ticket from client 1 to get a ticket from Mandy Rose. So based on this information, we're able to see the fact that the attacker was able to move in the environment. He already compromised Mandy Rose because he performed brute force, and then he was able to get access to Will Blank, which is one of our sensitive users. The other thing that I want to point out in the incident, we have the different users and we have the investigation priority score. So the higher the score, the more at risk the user is. So we can see that Mandy Rose had a score of 30. So we already know that the attacker was going after her, and we already know that once he was able to compromise her, he was able to get to Will Blank. So if we actually click on Will Blank's user page, we can see a couple of things here. So we can see his investigation priority score. We can see the 2 open alerts. We can see the accounts and devices that he has access to, and we see 2 alerts. So we see that the first alert that took place was a suspected golden ticket usage. So you can see that there was persistence in the environment. The attacker was able to compromise this user using this technique. And once the user was compromised, the attacker was able to unfortunately go into a DC sync attack and compromise the entire environment. So this is a great way to see what happens with the user and what are the riskiest users in your environment, and really prioritize your investigation based on that. We also have the lateral movement paths available here as well. So we can see how the attacker was able to move laterally to go ahead and gain access to Will. So we can see that he gained access to client 1, and client 1 is an admin client 2 where the user 1 was logged into, which actually happens to be Mandy Rose. Once the attacker compromised Mandy, he was able to again move from client 1 to Will Blank and compromise him as well. So these are some of the things we want to go ahead and take a look at to really understand what's happening within our incidents. Next, Daniel will walk you through what's possible with advanced hunting.
Thanks, Banu. One of the main pillars for Microsoft 365 Defender is the advanced hunting. The advanced hunting allows you to hunt over activities from different data sources, including Microsoft Defender for Identity. The 2 main use cases for advanced hunting are investigation over existing alerts or hunting the dark. Using advanced hunting, you can elaborate more on activities and alerts that happens in your environment and know more about alerts that you can find. Let's deep dive into the data that advanced hunting contains. We'll start with data that comes from Microsoft Defender for Identity, and we'll start with one of the tables on the left. If you click on the information here, you can see details about what does this table contains, what are the columns, and some sample queries that you can start and use. In this case, you can see all the users in a specific country, or in the logon events that also come from Microsoft Defender for Identity, you can find out all the authentication that happens using LDAP authentication with a clear text password. To learn more about data for each type of table, what you can do is just click the name of the table. In this case, identity directory event, and hunt over what available action type it has. In this case, we can see different information that Microsoft Defender for Identity is providing, including service creation, SMB sessions, group membership changes, account password changes, and more and more. In the identity query events, which is the data that is relevant for any type of activity that happens against the Active Directory, we can find 3 different type of queries that happens with the 3 different protocols: the DNS protocol, the SAMR, and the LDAP. For the second part, where you can elaborate more on existing alerts, what you can do is use the table that calls alert information and hunt over any type of alert that come from Microsoft Defender for Identity with a specific title for the alert. This query will find us the alerts that we talked about previously in the demo. In this case, the suspected DC sync. We can take the alert ID and hunt over the evidence that are including this alert and see additional information that these alerts can provide. In this alert, we see that there are 3 entities that are impacted that are relevant for the alert. Some of them are the user that are relevant for the DC sync, and the device that the desync was happening from. Using advanced hunting, you can take the device ID and hunt over data that comes from Microsoft Defender for endpoints or Microsoft Defender for identity, and hunt over the data to see additional information and elaborate more around existing data for alerts.
Microsoft Defender for Identity has great resources that can be leveraged. You can use our technical documentation. You can go ahead and start a trial from our product page. In addition to that, you can investigate our alerts. They get updated on a weekly basis as well as enhanced. Join our conversation through our technical community where you can engage with other product managers such as myself and learn the latest and greatest about our products.